love talking about hags. They are, without a doubt, my favourite creature in the Dungeons and Dragons pantheon, and you're about to find out why, courtesy of Auntie Ethel. Throughout the events of Baldur's Gate 3, she's trying to resurrect the Seeing Pearl and become lead of the Coven in the process. There are signs that a hag known only as M is the other surviving sister of the Seeing Pearl, but by the time Auntie Ethel makes it to Baldur's Gate, it's pretty obvious that she's been killed, as we hear nothing more from her. Hags are a fertile, rotting web for quests, and, once upon a time, Auntie Ethel was at the centre of her very own Coven questline that was far bigger than the one we ended up getting in the final game. Larian cut this questline from the final release of Baldur's Gate 3, but they didn't get rid of all of the evidence that it ever existed. So this is why Auntie Ethel is way more powerful than most people, including Tav, truly realise, and what her original Coven questline would have been about. Hags are all about the twisted feminine. While once they could have been interpreted as a misogynistic view of elderly women, it's twisted so far now that these are female monsters who are entirely conscious of how they appear and delight in the disturbances they cause. An important thing to make clear right from the very beginning is that 3 is an incredibly significant number for a hag coven. With 2 hags, there's no guarantee anything will get done, as they'll just be arguing the entire time, so a 3rd hag is needed to settle disputes. Having a 3rd member also means that they can all plot each other to their heart's content, A and B against C, A and C against B, and B and C against A. So, in the Coven of the Seeing Pearl, we have Auntie Ethel, M, and who exactly? Perhaps the child that Ethel was trying to gestate? Auntie Ethel seems like a name that Ethel picked out just to seem more homely, relatable, and trustworthy to those who she would come across, but the title Auntie actually has significance for hags. Auntie Ethel, having the Auntie title, means she's either very old, a member of a previously powerful coven, or has been directly serving a grandmother. Because there is a hierarchy among hags, and it's not discreet. Despite their conniving, duplicitous and selfish nature, to upset a hag of a higher status is to call down their vindictive nature upon one's own blood-encrusted head. Hags scheme over the course of decades to bring about the downfalls of mortals they perceived to have wronged them, so just imagine that stretched over centuries when it comes to feuding against their own kind. Every single hag who's been pushed down a couple of femurs on the bone ladder will be quickly taken advantage of by other hags, and have their own position absorbed before they're even aware that it's theirs no more. At the very top of the hag hierarchy family tree are grandmothers. These hags are wise through centuries of manipulative politicking and powerful after taking advantage of thousands of mortals. Hag grandmothers can be so powerful that they end up having as much power as certain members of the Archfey, like the Queen of Air and Darkness or Serenos or Baba Yaga. On the branch underneath grandmothers are aunties. Aunties just like Auntie Ethel. Aunties aren't as powerful as grandmothers, but that doesn't mean you should underestimate them. To even have that title means they've clawed their way up that ladder, leaving plenty of bloody and bitter hag rivals beneath them. To have a title like Auntie or Grandmother means other hags have to call you by that title unless they're of a higher status than you are, so it's not to be underestimated, and also works as a really sneaky way to make sure mortals have a unconscious trust in you from the moment they meet you if you call yourself something like Auntie Ethel. Now, every auntie's aim is to become a grandmother themselves. Hags are ambitious, selfish, and violent, so this is never not the case. It's very rare that a hag is simply content with her station in life, because she perceives everything that's ever happened to her as having happened to wrong her. So, in order to fix all those wrongs and naturally restore the balance that there should be, she should be on the top of the family tree, in her own mind, and every single hag thinks like this. Now, for any hag to have the ambition to be a grandmother is pretty rote and predictable at this point, but for an auntie to have that ambition to be a grandmother should send a warning to everyone nearby, as aunties have already proved that they are powerful, and for some it's only a matter of time before they figure out how to become a grandmother. And so, it won't surprise you to hear that Auntie Ethel's goal is to become a grandmother, and that's the quest we meet her in the middle of in Baldur's Gate 3. I do want to point out quickly here that M could have been a grandmother that Auntie Ethel was serving. However, the fact that she signs off her letters with M makes me think she's not, as if you were a grandmother, you'd kind of want to hold that over any other hags that are serving you. So to not sign off the letters with Grandmother M makes me think that's not very likely. So M and Auntie Ethel are more likely sisters at around the same rank in the Seeing Pearl Coven. Speaking of Auntie Ethel's Coven, as I've mentioned before, it is called the Seeing Pearl. And it's no coincidence that the hag eye that Tav can get from Auntie Ethel is perfectly white, just like a pearl. Hag eyes are ways that hags can see through the eyes of their thralls. This is something the thrall has to generally agree to in exchange for something else, and it means that their thrall is permanently marked out with a white eye. This is probably the modus operandi of the Seeing Pearl Coven, their trademark as it were, to have all of their thralls have a hag eye and for them to be able to use those seeing pearls to their own ends. By that logic, anyone with a white eye in Baldur's Gate 3 can be said to be one of the thralls of the Seeing Pearl Coven. Now, I've had a look and I couldn't find any characters apart from Orin, which I don't think she's a thrall of the Seeing Pearl Coven, and Tav to have one singular white eye. But if you know an NPC that I have somehow missed that has a single white eye, please leave their name in the comments. However, there are characters that have eye patches. The three that I could find that have eye patches which would hide a white eye are Captain Grizzly from the Blushing Mermaid, Gan, Moll and Mermuth. Gan and Moll are both children, but I wouldn't put it past Auntie Ethel to loop them into a hag eye bargain, as hags don't really have the argument of, oh, they were too young to know what they are really doing. Any victim is a victim to a hag. Auntie Ethel is trying to become Grandmother Ethel, but how? Ironically, not through having granddaughters, but daughters. Hags have been known to give hagbirth twice in order to form their own coven with their daughters, which is exactly what Auntie Ethel is doing during the events of Baldur's Gate 3. Having two hag daughters in her coven of 3, with her obviously being the third member, gives her leverage over her coven, which goes far further than just allying to pursue greater power together. A hag mother can essentially pull the mother card to keep her hag daughters under her thumb for as long as possible, which means she gets to claw onto her power for even longer and make moves to rise in the ranks of hags everywhere. Hags do have to train their daughters, they don't just get born knowing everything that a hag needs to know, so this training period does make a coven especially vulnerable, but once that's passed, the hag that gave birth to 2 daughters is one to be feared across all realms. Hag folk belief holds that hags who consume twins, triplets, or the 7th born of a 7th born give birth to hags that have rare, unusual, or powerful abilities in addition to their typical hag magic. But why would a hag want a powerful daughter who has abilities they do not, who could then potentially usurp them in the future? Because having a powerful hag under your thumb, bitterly indebted to you for raising them and creating them in the first place, is a sure way to make progress in that hag tree that I mentioned very fast indeed. Plus, hags who create hag daughters that have that rare, powerful magic are recognised as hags who are to be respected among their kin, which again grows their power. So how does hagbirth even work? We saw a brief glimpse of this in Act 3 of Baldur's Gate 3, but I think it bears explaining in greater detail because it's fascinating and also important to the way Auntie Ethel acts for the entirety of the game. Hags give birth in a process that is a mockery of the entire act of procreation, which is kind of sick, honestly. First off, hags have to eat a baby girl or a young girl, a child, whole. In their belly, the girl undergoes a transformation over a period of days to months, and when they're fully hag-blooded, the hag mother then vomits up their brand new hag daughter. This is what Auntie Ethel is trying to do with Mayrina's baby and Vanra in Baldur's Gate 3. And yes, it has to be a girl. Mayrina knew her baby was going to be a girl, which is why Auntie Ethel targeted her. Why do I say targeted? Well, Connor's death apparently was a bloodbath, guts everywhere, as Mayrina's brother testifies to. Which is a weird way for someone to go. I think Auntie Ethel found out that Mayrina knew she was having a girl and ripped Connor apart herself, knowing it would force Mayrina into a depression and eventually she'd make her way to lovely old Auntie Ethel. When Tav finds out about the circumstances surrounding Connor's death, they can even comment that Mordenkainen warns them that hags often cause their victims' tragedies, again implying that Auntie Ethel was to blame for Connor's death. But it all kind of worked out for Auntie Ethel in the end, so it was a bet well made. But why don't hags just eat a boy instead and have a hag son? Well, male hags do exist. They often occur when a hag has sex with another race and then gives birth to a boy instead of the girl they crave. Male hags are called hagspawn and are not nearly as powerful as the daughters that hags desire so fervently. That's because hagspawn are half whatever race their father was, which dilutes their hag blood for the worse. Whereas when a hag gives birth to a female hag, she inherits all of her mother's abilities and retains no attributes from her parents. Simply put, girls are more valuable, and as hags are self-serving and want to give birth to other hags to build their own coven, those are the only gender that they really pursue. After all that though, why not just procreate with a male after disguising yourself as a beautiful woman, and then have a child and skip the whole stealing a baby thing, which does take a lot more effort? The answer, as with all things concerning hags, is self-interest and, importantly, self-satisfaction. They could do all that, sure, but if you find someone who's pregnant or someone who already has a young female child, you then get to make a bargain with them, which is delightful for hags as they love destroying people's lives and would even do it for no huge benefit to themselves, and then they just get to watch and torment the parent for as long as they want until the child, or more accurately the hag daughter, is theirs. There is nothing sweeter for a hag than to see a mortal snatch defeat from what they thought were the jaws of victory. As for what happens when a hag ingests a trans, intersex or non-binary child, I have absolutely no idea. Wizards of the Coast's writers haven't addressed this, and that's a whole other video essay. One of the things that bugs me out the most is that I don't know what a hag's childhood looks like, or if they even have one, and trust me, I have tried to find out, but nevertheless, the whole process of hagbirth is extremely draining and makes the hag vulnerable for as long as it lasts. Bearing all of that in mind, it's exceptionally rare for hags to give birth to two daughters in quick succession, marking Auntie Ethel out as ambitious and powerful to even be able to attempt such a trying ritual. So short story long, that's why Auntie Ethel wants daughters of her own. Don't get it confused with any kind of maternal instinct. When I first ran into Auntie Ethel and her tea house, I'm not gonna lie, I did think it was just gonna be a cover for providing abortions. Drink the tea, get rid of the baby, and Mayrina being there did kind of give me that vibe. But it was Auntie Ethel's lair, and an incredibly powerful one at that, because it's not just the tea house that's her lair. The entire region of the Putrid Bog is Auntie Ethel's lair. Auntie Ethel having her own region in the Putrid Bog marks her out as being incredibly powerful, even for an auntie. Hags pick locations based on where the veil between the mortal world and the Feywild is thinnest. Their magic is strongest there, and they can prey on inhabitants of either realm with minimal effort, which is the ideal scenario for a hag. Because unlike devils, hags don't hunt down their victims. They prefer them to come of their own accord on their hands and knees through their threshold, as it makes their downfall all the sweeter to know that their victims came to them out of their own volition, because that thought will eventually be just torturous to the poor sods. It's even better if that lair is near a civilian settlement, just far enough that mortals don't see a hag as an immediate threat, but always close enough for a hag to be a viable last resort for the unfortunately short-sighted of their ilk. The entire Putrid Bog has marks of it being dangerous. Redcaps in Auntie Ethel's service who butcher anyone in the bog, like the ruined travellers' camp Tav can find, as well as barbed bulrushes being almost everywhere. As players, we're almost tricked into looting these barbed bulrushes because you've probably been looting almost everything in sight up until that point, but barbed bulrushes can cause piercing damage if you fail a sleight of hand check. The character gets the open wound condition, which, with every failed constitution save, descends into rotting, then flesh rot, and then, unless they passed a 15 con check, the rotting condition is persistently reapplied. As a green hag, this barbed bulrush is very deliberately placed to make sure that in her region the most suffering is happening as much as possible. Because the influence of a hag's lair stretches far beyond her threshold if she's powerful enough. The land surrounding her home is twisted by her presence, and can suffer regional effects which are exacerbated if the hag is a grandmother or auntie. These effects can include beasts with an intelligence of less than 2 being charmed by the hag, forcing them to be the aggressor against anyone who steps foot within her domain. I don't mean to read the poor addled frog, but even with an intelligence of 3, it isn't enough to save this poor frog from Auntie Ethel's clutches. For me, that's a sign that Auntie Ethel is far more powerful than we realise, because she can ensnare even slightly smarter animals. The poor frog is described in the dev notes as desperately trying not to hurt the player and doing everything she can to hold back, and recites what seems to be a mantra of her favourite things.
Green leaves, shallow water. Green leaves, shallow water.
To keep a handle on her behaviour and resist hurting Tav. This is the effect that a hag can have on poor creatures that fall within metres of her threshold. More evidence that Auntie Ethel is a powerful green hag can be found in the mud, quite literally. According to Volo's Guide to Monsters, regions that are considered host to a hag become more difficult to traverse and take twice as normal to progress through, since plants grow thick and twisted and the grass becomes thick with reeking mud. Trees also transform into awakened trees and attack intruders, and at first I didn't think this applied to the putrid bog. However, when Tav reaches the decrepit sanctuary, woodwoads are there to greet them. Woodwoads are bound to a tree, the one in the centre of the decrepit sanctuary here, and so could be interpreted as being awakened trees. This is double sacrilege against the area. The tree at the centre of the decrepit sanctuary and the ancient obelisks, as well as the spiral marking on the stone floor, mark this location as once having been a druid sanctuary, potentially an outcropping of the emerald grove that's so nearby. And sure enough, a druid sanctuary is exactly what it's called before you dispel Auntie Ethel's illusion. And trust me, she is almost certainly thrilled that a once holy site is decayed and attacking anyone who comes close at her behest. In Baldur's Gate 3, Auntie Ethel acts like a kind old granny who just wants to help those who need it. And that's a lie. A hag's help is like a monkey paw. They'll do what they said they would to the letter, but it's never in the way that the victim expected. Auntie Ethel, though, is telling the truth in one regard. She describes herself as the best hag around. The dev notes indicate here that she's not showboating. Auntie Ethel is telling the truth when she says she's powerful, even among fellow hags. My girlfriend is from Derry, and she listened to Auntie Ethel's accent for me to determine just how genuine it is, as the VA is English. I wanted to find out whether Auntie Ethel was putting on this Irish accent, though in Faerun it's obviously not Irish, in order to appear more comforting to those who she preys on. Now, my girlfriend said it sounds like an Irish performer for sure, which is good, sounds authentic, but it sounds like they're hamming it up for an audience, which utterly fits Auntie Ethel's duplicitous character. Sure enough, Auntie Ethel is hamming it up, as next to Octa and her simmering soup, in the belly of the Emerald Grove, you can find dear Auntie Ethel and her potion stand. It's a perfect place for a hag. Not only are the El Terrell refugees absolutely desperate, they're also in a land completely alien to them and so don't have much gold to go around, or much knowledge of the area, so they wouldn't know that a hag is nearby. Having less gold, courtesy of being a refugee fleeing from El Terrell, means that they also have less money to pay Auntie Ethel for her potions, so they'd have to offer something else in recompense. Potentially a favour, and I don't think I need to explain to you that it's never good to owe a hag a favour. You would think that the druids would warn the tieflings that there was a hag nearby, even if they were fooled by her disguise as the human Auntie Ethel, especially considering that the druids have been in correspondence with Auntie Ethel. She sent them a letter delivered by a bird called Cirith, who had died 10 days before the letter arrived. Somehow Auntie Ethel had got them out of the ground, and, admittedly, this did appear to scare the druids, though there is absolutely no sign that they met with Auntie Ethel or did anything about the letter. True to form for the stereotypical druids, they stuck their head in the sands and decided that they would just let that sort itself out, without trying to help it along its way whatsoever. Also, if you try and give the druids the benefit of the doubt that they didn't know that Auntie Ethel was so close, this doesn't hold any water either. As stewards of nature, they would have been able to pick up on the corrupt energies of a hag disturbing the local flora and fauna, especially because she had such a huge region under her control in the form of the putrid bog. And as if that's not enough, a copy of The Evil Eye can be found in the Emerald Grove, which details the qualities of various different types of hags. So, even if they weren't talking to Auntie Ethel per se, someone must have had a suspicion that a hag was nearby and been trying to do some research on them. And then, if you go even further, Sylvanus would have seen the presence of a hag nearby as an affront to the natural order. Perhaps the Emerald Grove didn't think they were powerful enough to cast out Auntie Ethel, or they didn't want to invite her wrath upon the Grove. But it is weird that they didn't mention her at all to the tieflings. The pessimist in me wonders if Cagher specially wanted the tieflings to fall victim to the hag, which would rid the Emerald Grove of them, even though this is incredibly dark, though the fact that she was in league with the Shadow Druids makes this a bit easier to believe. One tiefling in particular got caught in Auntie Ethel's web. Her name is Padirna. Padirna drank a potion from Auntie Ethel that was supposed to make her as strong as a bugbear, and the potion did work, to be fair. Padirna became as strong as a bugbear, but couldn't put that strength to use because the potion also paralysed her legs. Classic hag behaviour. She was then relegated to guard duty, tucked out of the way in the shed. I'm about halfway through telling you all about Auntie Ethel and why she's way more powerful than we realise, so if you're enjoying this video, please do like it and subscribe to my channel. I'm in very early days at the moment, but I'd love to continue doing this full time, and to aid in that, my Patreon is now live. All of my videos are on Patreon ad-free, and you get a bonus monthly video about a lore topic which you can vote for in the Patreon, as well as loads of other benefits. So if you feel like you want to support me in a little extra bit, then please do sign up to my Patreon. You are all angel babies, and I appreciate every single one of you. The reason Padirna wanted to be strong and risked drinking a potion that promised an almost unbelievable benefit from a stranger is actually pretty sad. Her wife Almara had died on the road when the refugees were fleeing Elturel. Padirna felt like she had failed her wife, and she wanted to make sure that she could be there for anyone else who was at risk on the road, hence needing to be as strong as a bugbear. This is just one of the types of people that Auntie Ethel would take advantage of. Desperate, hurt, and vulnerable, though don't get me wrong, selfish people also seek out hags too. When the Emerald Grove wasn't home to trusting folk, Auntie Ethel had a tea house to run. Inside the cosy tea house, people were lulled into a false sense of security, as they would be served tea, which also gave Ethel the perfect opportunity to slip something into the brew. On a balcony table in the tea house, and also in her potion stall in the grove, you can actually find a teapot made out of a real toad. This is a very subtle hint that Auntie Ethel isn't what she seems, and you maybe shouldn't trust anything coming from someone who's turned a real-life frog, flesh and all, into a teapot. I can imagine Auntie Ethel absolutely delighting in seeing her victims drink out of it, potentially completely unsuspecting, as her illusion would have made it look like a normal ceramic teapot. Utterly vile. When Tav makes it to the tea house, you can see that people have tried to kill Auntie Ethel before. These paladins, for example. Hags are incredibly difficult to kill, and this doesn't just go for aunties. Hags live for a really long time, even longer than dragons and elves, and even though they are still technically mortal, hags have still devised ways to keep death far, far away. Death may be the only thing that a hag truly fears, as to die is to lose. And hags just hate to lose. This is where the name of Auntie Ethel's Coven comes in as well. As Sisters of the Seeing Pearl can refer to hagi, it can also refer to pearl spore bells, a type of mushroom. Auntie Ethel sequesters her soul in these mushrooms, so every time someone thinks she's dead, she actually resurrects herself using the life force that's stored in the mushrooms. In order to truly kill Ethel, her circle of lustrous pearl spore bells must be destroyed. That's the case for Act 3 at least, and this is where the hag quest comes into it, because there is a little bit of irregularity in the way that Auntie Ethel dies in Act 1 versus how she resurrects herself in Act 3. In Act 1, you can find her phylactery, in the form of the tarnished charm which she wears around her neck. You can loot it from her body, and interestingly enough, it results in some different Speak with Dead dialogue if she doesn't have it on her body. And I know this is her phylactery because there's a dialogue object flag which reads, Object hag, hag state has phylactery, character has Ethel's phylactery true in the game files, which basically means that if Ethel has the tarnished charm, the phylactery on her, her responses are different. And it's called phylactery in the game files, so that's definitely what it is. If you read the description for the tarnished charm, it confirms it even more as it reads, a menacing cackle emanates from this twisted charm. It whispers to bite, to maim, to kill. That is Auntie Ethel's soul, and she is chatty. The tarnished charm grants the condition Fey Life, which reduces the DC of death saving throws for the wearer from 10 to 5. The subtext of this is that it's really easy for Auntie Ethel to survive death saving throws and thus resurrect herself via her pearl spore mushrooms. After killing Auntie Ethel, you can use Speak with Dead on her. With the tarnished charm on her corpse, her responses are as if she is still alive, vicious, petty, and threatening.
A charm on the hag's body flashes a faint glow.
Oh, you knuckle-dragging gobshite! You will bleed. You will choke on your own guts for this.
That's a clue that Auntie Ethel isn't dead, and that her soul remains close to her body. But if you've looted the tarnished charm from her body, her responses are different. Without her tarnished charm, Auntie Ethel is forced to resurrect herself elsewhere, and therefore can't puppet her body as strongly as she could if her soul was skin to skin with her corpse via the tarnished charm. Auntie Ethel messes with the characters in Baldur's Gate 3, but also with us as players. Borderline breaking the fourth wall makes Auntie Ethel very powerful indeed. Auntie Ethel's ability flavor text speaks directly to us as the player. The Necromancy of Fae is the only other item in the game to do this as far as I can tell. Whereas a spell like Tasha's Hideous Laughter has a description of leave a creature prone with laughter without the ability to get up, Auntie Ethel's spell, A Coven of Hags, reads, you'll never find your Auntie Ethel. Polymorphed condition reads, creature is turned into a harmless sheep with 3 hit points for 5 turns. If the sheep's hit points are reduced to 0, the creature reverts to its original form with its original hit points. These descriptions tell you what the spell does, because as the player, you want that info. However, in the hands-off petal condition it reads, Ethel disapproves, dearie. Both the spell and the condition break meta. We, as the player, are reading this description, and Auntie Ethel is speaking directly to us. Her potions are unique in Baldur's Gate 3 too, in that their effects aren't listed underneath their name. Tav, we, have to drink them to figure out what the hell they do, and by the time they're down our gullet, it's too late to escape the ramifications. Each potion has effects that are a play on its name and shows Auntie Ethel's twisted sense of humour. These are 3 of the best ones. Boon of the Hag gives the condition Auntie Ethel's special brew, and whoever drinks it takes 2d6 poison damage at the start of every turn until they pass a Constitution saving throw. If Auntie Ethel is killed in Act 1 and her corpse is brought into Act 2, her body will be replaced by this Boon of the Hag potion the first time the party long rests, implying that Auntie Ethel has resurrected herself and fled the coop. Seeing her corpse replaced by Boon of the Hag might make some players think this is a reward for killing the hag, and they would be wrong. Butterflies in the Stomach is described as a traditional brew of ergot and nutmeg meant to recapture the fluttering thrill of first love. Upon drinking it, Tav gains the hemorrhage condition and takes 1d6 piercing damage at the end of each of their turn. Monstrous butterflies are literally in Tav's stomach, damaging them. Auntie Ethel does this to prey on people thinking they're gonna benefit from something reminiscent of first love, but they end up getting hurt by it. And now they'll forever associate their first love with being hemorrhaged by a hag, which is just excellent psychic torment, really. Finally, there's the Missing Pets potion. It's filled with the sounds of thousands of little legs skittering inside, seeking an escape. This one is actually pretty sad. It grants the Missing Pets condition, where Tav cannot move, is frightened, and gets disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. Tav temporarily is behaving like the missing pets that Auntie killed to make this potion, frightened with a disadvantage on any checks to escape. Auntie Ethel's dark sense of humour goes further into just being plain cruel when it comes to her actual victims. So the wand used to control Connor is called Bitter Divorce, which is mocking Mayrina's painful separation from her husband. This dig is for Auntie Ethel's benefit alone, like a bully with their own burn book. And it even goes a step further, because if Tav uses the Bitter Divorce wand, the ability to summon Connor is called Second Marriage, implying that Connor has ditched Mayrina in favour of now being married to Tav, which just... ouch. Now onto Auntie Ethel's abandoned Coven questline. The biggest evidence that this ever existed and is immediately visible is the hag eye you can get from making a bargain with Auntie Ethel, even though she can't hold up her end of the bargain, mind you, though that has never and will never bother a hag. When Tav asks Auntie Ethel to get rid of the tadpole in their eye, Auntie Ethel will try her hardest but will be repulsed, and scared, by the Netherese magic pulsing through the tadpole. She refuses to meddle with it completely, saying,
Goddamn wretched! Ah! You little shit! You didn't tell me it was Netherese! I'm not touching that! Filthy shadow magic brings nothing but chains and misery! How could I have missed that stink? Like blood and piss congealing on my tongue! Ah!
Which is ironic considering her love of chains and misery and magic that causes all those kinds of things. Dev notes explain that she feels almost anxious about having Netherese magic in her home. Now, I couldn't find a clear answer about why Netherese magic in particular grosses Auntie Ethel out, so this might just be a plot device. However, I can theorise. As a fey creature, Netherese magic may unsettle hags because they see it as a mortal's attempt to shackle magic itself, and hags, being fey who channel their inherent weird magic, see that as disgusting. If you have any theories about why you think hags hate Netherese magic so much, please do share it with me in the comments, because I want to know. Anyway, when Tav taunts Auntie Ethel by accusing her of not being powerful enough to remove the tadpole, Auntie Ethel threatens to kill them, but acknowledges that she needs to honour her debt somehow. Dev notes write that Auntie Ethel can't have her reputation tarnished. Interesting that she spares consideration for her reputation, as she needs mortals to think that she can do her job, so they keep coming to her. So, even though Auntie Ethel can't remove Tav's tadpole, she still turns one of their eyes into a hag eye. As I explained before, hag eyes are used by hags so that they can see through the eyes of their thralls. Only a hag coven can create a hag eye, a hag can't make it on her own, and if the hags creating the hag eye take any other action aside from performing the ritual, they have to start all over again. So, to create a hag eye isn't something to be undertaken lightly. So considering a hag eye takes a coven to make, for Auntie Ethel to be able to wield this magic on her own marks her out as being incredibly powerful. Having a hag eye grants the condition paid the price, otherwise known as hag-eyed in the code. A hag eye cannot be removed, and so in the game it grants a permanent condition called paid the price or hag-eyed. Now, it's unusual for Tav to suffer a one-off condition that doesn't have persistent consequences. Paid the price, for context, gives Tav +1 to intimidation checks, but disadvantage on perception checks and attacking hags. Even in Act 3, when Tav meets the hag survivors, they only comment once on the hag eye, whereas you'd think that would be a reason for them not to even let Tav in the door, that they know Auntie Ethel can see through their eye. And Dolly Dolly Dolly, a pixie in Act 2, doesn't comment on it either, and as a fellow fae creature I'd expect her to have something to say about a hag eye, but apparently not. The pixie living in the printing press in the Baldur's Mouth offices can be revealed with the hag eye, but that's about all the hag eye does. Now, the hag eye would make a lot more sense if Tav was originally due to run into Auntie Ethel's sisters. The hag eye would warn them that Tav was coming, as they'd be able to see through it, and Tav would be able to see signs of the hag's fey nature and the fact that they were wielding magic that would otherwise pass unnoticed. So basically, why would you have a permanent condition if that permanent condition didn't come with permanent consequences for Tav? To me, this is a remnant of the original Hag Coven questline. The second clue about the cut Hag Coven questline is the Staff of Crones, found in the treasure room of Auntie Ethel's lair. The description gives a clue that the staff was originally much more significant. It reads, "Live worms wriggle beneath the crumbling surface of this half-rotten staff. Merely touching it fills you with a wave of unbearable nausea and a strange longing, as if it's calling out for its like. There's also a ring named the Hag's Ring, which was cut from the final game. The description of this ring reads, grimy, discoloured and revoltingly ugly. Auntie Ethel must have made it herself. Surprisingly, you feel no disgust. Instead, it fills you with a longing, as if it's calling out for its like." The longing in both item descriptions to me sounds like they would both do something when a hag was nearby, like shudder potentially or vibrate, which would warn Tav that one of Auntie Ethel's sister was nearby, revealing their disguise and preventing them from getting the jump on Tav. The hag eye and the Staff of Crones can be dismissed honestly, like those are just theories, but indisputable evidence comes in the form of the dialogue. Now, I've done a dig through the dialogue files of Baldur's Gate 3 thanks to a parser I found, and on occasion writers will add context pointers to the delivery of lines to benefit the voice actors so they know the best way to perform them. As I am an especially rabid lore addict and researcher and cannot let go of something once it's got stuck in my stupid ass head, I read through every line Auntie Ethel has to see if I could spot anything that referred to this cut Hag Coven questline, which at that point I thought was hearsay. And I found something. Auntie Ethel's following line during Speak with Dead.
"I won't be a corpse forever. That I can bloody promise you."
Has the added context, player has asked if being dead bothers you. You grit your teeth in rage, but you know your sisters will avenge you. Also in Speak with Dead, if Auntie Ethel is an imposition of her tarnished charm and is being taunted by Tav, she says, "Where there's people, there's hags." The context for this line is that Auntie Ethel has a big smile on her face at their arrogance, and, quote, "Your sisters will rip them to pieces and you can't wait." That's 2 mentions of Auntie Ethel's sisters. This confirms that Auntie Ethel's Coven of the Seeing Pearl had at least 2 other members who are bound by self-interest to avenge their sister, Auntie Ethel, and send the message that no one who kills a hag gets away with it. During my excavation of Baldur's Gate 3's dialogue, I found some flags that shed light on what Auntie Ethel's questline was originally meant to cover. Flags are lines of code that track conditions in Baldur's Gate 3's dialogue trees. It makes sure that the game responds to things that Tav has done. So, for example, if you have a certain item in your inventory, you'll have different dialogue options, or if an NPC has already met Tav before, they'll skip any introduction dialogue. These flags can look something like this. If you're listening to this, I'm flashing some flags up on the screen right now that will indicate what they look like. Flags are umbrellaed under a topic, then an event, then a true and false statement, and an action. This isn't always the case for flags, but I'm speaking broadly here. So, this flag occurs under the hag topic, is triggered when Mayrina's brothers ambush the hag, and Tav has read Mayrina's letter. Looking at these dialogue flags is a sneaky way for me to figure out where Tav could have gone and what they could have done. All the ones I found are labelled unused, so they didn't make it into the final release of Baldur's Gate 3. The pieces are jumbled and entire chapters are missing, but I can fit together a semi-coherent quest line. Here we go. First off, Tav would have still had their first encounter with Auntie Ethel in the Druid's Grove, which, in the game's dialogue tree, is called the Den. Auntie Ethel is still disguised as a kind old granny and is worried about her missing nephew, a halfling named Denon Wimner. She asks Tav to find Denon and bring her beloved nephew back, and offers Tav a poison to coat their weapon with, which I think will probably put Denon to sleep on a hit, allowing Tav to deliver him to Auntie Ethel, or maybe just kill him because Auntie Ethel wants him out of the way. Auntie Ethel gives Tav a code phrase to say to Denon to know that Tav has been sent by Auntie Ethel, and I think that code phrase is Harpy Meal, as that's in some of the flags for the dialogue. I would wager that Auntie Ethel framed this as, oh, poor Denon is such a paranoid sort, so to reassure him, it's just his Auntie Ethel who wants to make sure he's okay, say Harpy Meal to him and he'll know you've met me and can be trusted. When, in reality, this would be a warning to Denon that Auntie Ethel is on his trail, and he'd better come back sharpish for his own good. Or Denon might have been captured by the harpies near the grove and he's about to become a Harpy Meal, which, yes, is a play on Happy Meal. Tav would meet Denon, say the code phrase, and then Denon would affirm that he knows of Auntie Ethel. After that, Auntie Ethel would leave the Druid's Grove and be on her way to her tea house, I assume with Denon. Later, Tav would meet Auntie Ethel in the forest undergoing a fight, and Auntie Ethel would call upon some spiders to help her. These spiders might not be spiders at all, but disguised redcaps, just like the sheep, although another sign that a region is host to a hag is that it's propagated by spiders and toads in greater quantities than usual, so these could literally be spiders. Tav would have made it to Auntie Ethel's lair, at the entrance to which is a trap waiting in the brambles, and one of Auntie Ethel's victims is stuck in the entrance and Tav could free them. Auntie Ethel Lair then would have a pen and a puzzle to solve, and has the same sentient door as we meet in the final cut of Baldur's Gate 3. Giving Auntie Ethel one of your eyes in Act 1 is the price for removing your tadpole, but this wasn't the case in the original plan. In exchange for releasing Mayrina, Tav would have given Auntie Ethel their eye, who I'm almost certain would have turned it into a hag eye, hence the paid the price condition that we still find in the final game. Making it through Auntie Ethel's lair, if they go the hostile route, Tav would have encountered one of her flock, those masked poor sods, and found out that Auntie Ethel is not working alone. She has sisters, and therefore a coven to back her up. In Act 3, one of these hags would have even made an appearance, but unlike Auntie Ethel, she wasn't going to be a green hag, she was a sea hag. Data miners have found her face and hair deep in the game files, unused, but proof that once a sea hag roamed the streets of Baldur's Gate. Her presence was no secret to a certain beggar found outside of the Baldur's Mouth newspaper building, but they would only hint twice that the sea hag had made her home in Baldur's Gate. Considering that Baldur's Gate is bordered on its western side by the Sea of Swords, a sea hag making her lair in the city makes perfect sense, and there are even caves where she could have lived. It would probably be somewhere similar to the underwater cave by Umberlee's temple. And hags of any kind can work together in Hag Coven. Once united in sisterhood to prevent the Coven from fracturing, they're bound to treat each other as equals, so it doesn't really matter that a green hag and a sea hag would be in a Coven together. Those are all the unused flags I could find and give a fairly good idea of the story beats that Auntie Ethel's original quest would have had. The Putrid Bog would have been much more significant in the original quest too. Tav has two ways to get to the Shadow-Cursed Land in Baldur's Gate 3, via Rosimorn Monastery and the Mountain Trail, or via the Underdark through the Grimforge. One scrapped route went through Auntie Ethel's Bog. A boat on the beach could have been dug up, and Tav would have set sail for the Shadow-Cursed Lands, arriving not on foot, but via the Kionthar River. In these flags that I'm putting on screen, SCL refers to Act 2's Shadow-Cursed Lands, Shadow-Cursed Lands SCL. And I have an entire video about how the Shadow Curse came to be, so make sure to give that a watch if you're hankering to uncover its secrets. Tav would have also been able to destroy the boat to prevent anyone else from using it, and I wonder if this was a means to prevent Auntie Ethel from escaping Act 1 and making it to Act 3 intact, but I really can't be sure. While misty stepping over the roofs of Baldur's Gate city proper, I found what I believe to be leftovers from the Hag questline. There's a picnic atop of a roof that overlooks an area where coffins are being built, which is creepy enough, but this picnic blanket is also scattered with purely green items. There's grapes, kiwi and sunmelon, as well as a wand that looks very similar to the bitter divorce wand that controls Connor. A tribute to a hag from one of her victims, maybe, or just a sign that something is up in Baldur's Gate. Something potentially for Tav to see that would instantly make them suspicious that a green hag was at work in the city streets, thanks to all of the green items on the blanket. Back in Act 1 in the Underdark, there's a fairy circle that leads to an otherwise inaccessible area of Auntie Ethel's lair. It's fronted by a door that looks exactly like the sentient door that protects her lair proper, but this one is inactive and you can't walk through it. It feels strange and out of place. Maybe it was once used so you had another route into Auntie Ethel's lair that bypassed her tea house, trophy room and masked victims, but the fact that it has a sentient door, just like the other one, is a telltale sign to me that this was originally a lot more significant. Speaking of Auntie Ethel's victims, it really feels to me like one in particular was meant to make an appearance in later parts of the game. Ephraim Hammerborn is a gold dwarf petrified by Auntie Ethel to prevent him from dying to Ladger's bite, which is a Dwergar disease. Except it's not Ladger's bite that he's sick with. It was magic polluting his body that was put there by, wouldn't you know it, Auntie Ethel, who relished his desperation when he came seeking a cure. Upon freeing him, as long as Auntie Ethel is dead or he'll die from this disease immediately, Ephraim will solemnly promise to pay Tav back for the kindness they had shown him, like he's really serious about it. So I wonder if he was meant to reappear in Act 3 in the old Coven storyline. This next thing is more of a plot hole than anything, but there's also no indication of what happened to Marina's daughter if you meet Auntie Ethel in Act 3 after letting her have Marina's baby. Marina herself is nowhere to be found, but there's no sign of her daughter / Auntie Ethel's hag daughter either. Auntie Ethel remains pregnant with Vanra and the hag survivors meet, just without Marina at their helm, which seems like a plot hole to me. Auntie Ethel doesn't speak about what happened to Marina's daughter either, which is really out of character, as I would expect Auntie Ethel to boast that she already had a daughter and maybe even show her off. In Act 3, the grenade that gets Auntie Ethel to spew up Vanra was originally called the Marrow of Mercy, but by the time we encounter it, it's called the Hag's Bane, and it actually has a really cool Easter egg for my favourite Dungeons & Dragons adventure. In the description of the Hag's Bane is an Easter egg for the Wild Beyond the Witchlight adventure, namely about Igwilv, daughter of Baba Yaga and the inventor of a spell that a fair few of you will have used, Tasha's Hideous Laughter. The Hag's Bane description reads thus: In the land of Prismere, where fair Zybilna reigns, they had their share of hag trouble, oh yes, they had it in spades. Hags have a special predilection for children and the power inherent to innocence. Disrupting one in the consumption of that power could be cataclysmic for the hag. Igwilv is one of my favourite characters in D&D, but before I get distracted talking about her, it's her, under the guise of Zybilna the Archfey, who's implied to have benefited from the Hag's Bane. Zybilna rules the Feywild land of Prismere, which had plenty of hag trouble, as Zybilna's hag sisters, Scabatha Nightshade, Balvlorna Blightstraw and Endelyn Moongrave, froze Igwilv in her court and then carved Prismere up into 3 domains for themselves to rule, Hither, Thither and Yon, which are just amazing names for domains anyway. The Fae of Prismere had to come up with a grenade that would deal with the hags, and thus the Hag's Bane was born. Was that an excuse for me to talk about my favourite D&D adventure? Maybe. Okay, so now I make it onto the topic I'm sure a fair few of you have been thinking about. Who on earth are Auntie Ethel's sisters? We know that one has a name beginning with M after all, so that does narrow it down. Auntie Ethel is midway through replying to a letter from M when Tav interrupts and breaks into her lair to free Marina. These letters give a small clue about M's status. She doesn't address Auntie Ethel as Auntie Ethel, foregoing the prefix entirely. This may indicate that M is a superior status to Auntie Ethel, or that she's being intentionally snide by not using this deferential, which is likely. Ethel's replies call M Sister Dearest, which I do think would be replaced by a more deferential title if M was a grandmother. Considering everything I've said about hags in this video, the pettier reason seems like the wiser assumption to make. The letters themselves illustrate that M's masquerade as a harmless woman in Baldur's Gate is being disturbed somewhat. Her first letter begins in an elegant cursive hand, but by the end has descended into a harsh, sloping scrawl as M's fury overwhelms her. Things went downhill for M, and she was forced to send this letter to Auntie Ethel to ask for her help, as M reveals that some mewling wretches are trying to edge her out of her own territory. 4 agents have been sent after her, and she's killed every single one of them. While originally I thought this might be the hag survivors at work, the use of the word agents and wretches to me suggests that another coven is trying to muscle in on M's territory and help the citizens of Baldur's Gate and therefore themselves in return. The second letter is written in elegant cursive. M in this letter is perfectly in command of herself and her disguise, keeping her temper in check, and is in the worst possible position for a hag in a coven, needing help from her sister. M writes to Auntie Ethel to inform her that one of her clients has fled Baldur's Gate without paying her and will be making his way through Auntie Ethel's territory. M indicates that Auntie Ethel is welcome to do whatever she wants to with her client. Hag etiquette prevents Auntie Ethel from meddling in her sister's affairs without permission, because as written in the monster manual, hags don't like each other, but they do abide by an ageless code of conduct. Hags announce their presence before crossing into another hag's territory, bring gifts when entering another hag's dwelling, and break no oaths given to other hags, as long as the oath isn't given with the fingers crossed. Auntie Ethel herself discreetly warns other fae that a hag is at work in the area of the putrid bog by leaving a note with some poison apples in a basket, with the note signed off by Auntie Ethel. Any fae creature would see the fact that the note was signed off by someone called Auntie, immediately know that that meant a hag was at work, turn a 180 and go in the opposite direction. From this I can infer that it's wise for a favour asked by one hag to another to be paid back swiftly, in the same sentence if possible, which is what M does. In exchange for the subtext that Auntie Ethel will take care of M's problem client and thus be doing her a favour, M sends the green hag a girl whose mother's mind is failing, which of course Auntie Ethel rubs into her face. Nevertheless, Auntie Ethel catches Hydrangea Wubb, who becomes the Mask of Regret, and puppets her into one of the Hag Lair guards. So, who is M? I think she's Maud, the humble flower seller you can find in the city cemetery. A hag looking for people to take advantage of who just need someone to talk to couldn't pick a much better place than a cemetery, especially when they're selling flowers, almost trapping grievers into unburdening themselves onto such a kindly woman. Staking out a cemetery is pretty much a guarantee that you're going to find some people who are down on their luck or who are missing a loved one, so it's a pretty safe bet for a hag. Plus, Maud always sells oleander and belladonna, which is a bit weird. Belladonna flowers are poisonous, and black oleander can be used to keep necrosis from spreading, and combined these two flowers seem like suspicious things for a harmless flower seller to be hawking, don't you think? Depending on Tav's actions, Auntie Ethel gets her coven in the end. With both Vanra and Mayrina's child as hag daughters, she's laying low so as not to overwhelm her girls, preparing for their debut in the background. She writes that the Sisters of the Seeing Pearl will be whole once more, just as she wanted. With both daughters in her coven, Auntie Ethel is especially happy with Tav, and she even says she regrets not climbing Tav like a tree when she had the chance. You do have to be truly evil to get that epilogue letter from her though. Hags don't have sex for enjoyment, so Tav's malice is exceptionally vitriolic if it's got to the extent that it arouses Auntie Ethel. The subtle hint is also there that Auntie Ethel is planning to drop in on Tav with her coven at some point, as Vanra in particular can't wait to meet her new godparent, which to me smells of a bit of a grudge that Vanra might have against Tav from taking her from her real mother, potentially, though I have a hard time pretending that any true hag would regret not living life as a mortal once they've undergone the hag infusion. I would love to meet Vanra and Mayrina's daughter as hags, but alas, despite all the data mining, there is no evidence that shows what these two daughters would have actually looked like, which does make me sad. That is the story of Auntie Ethel's missing coven and why she's way more powerful than we or Tav realise. If you liked this video, please do like and subscribe to my little video game lore channel. I come out with a new lore video every single week, and if you want to see those videos ad-free, my Patreon is now live. You'll get all the videos I make on there ad-free, as well as a bonus monthly one about a bit of lore that you can vote on as a Patreon member. Also, I apologise if my delivery came across a bit tongue-tied in this video. My period started today and I feel like there are eels on my tongue and in my brain, so thank you for sticking around. And now I'm going to go and stroke my adorable cat Toto, who is just there on the cushion. So I'll see you lovely folks next time.